Hi, I'm Sharon from the Biodiversity Conservation Trust, and we all know the impact of feral cats on our native animals across New South Wales and Australia. And so today the BCT has partnered with our local land services to bring you a short video on how to set an effective feral cat trap.
Setting up a trap out in the environment, you want to be looking at things, blending it into the environment. So when we're out in the paddock, we're looking for trees and things that we can lean the trap up against and have one-way access into. Using well-used trails and setting up close to these well-used trails is a really good step to start with, and finding those paths of least resistance, just like we will follow the track and don't really want to walk through long grass and things like that to get places. So setting up our traps in an accessible location is the first step. Feral cats are primarily visual hunters, so using things like feathers in trees tied up near your traps can just draw them in enough to smell your lures and your baits and those sort of things to try draw them into the trap a bit better. Once we've found a suitable location for our trap to set up our trap, we need to make sure it has a solid base and isn't moving around and won't frighten the cat as it steps into it. We also need to make sure we cover the back half of the trap using either hessian or plastic or some leaves and branches that you have laying around. It can also help to add a black mat at the front of the trap and even painting your treadle black as well, just to try to stop cats that are a little bit trap shy from balking at the silver colour of the trap. So when you put the branches and these things on top of your trap, it's really important to make sure that the mechanism is still able to shut and close properly. That includes things at the front of the trap. If you're using sticks and those sort of things to level out the trap, making sure that it's not in the way and the trap shuts securely every time. It's really important to make sure you do a test run before you leave your trap set. Most importantly, for animal welfare reasons, make sure you check your trap daily once you've set it. It's important to have a euthanasia plan before you plan to trap any cats.
Kyle, what would you use as a bait?
There's a number of different things you can use for bait. It's probably really important things just to remember that cats are quite individual and they will take different lures and different baits depending on that individual cat as to what they feel like at the time or on the day. So I'd probably suggest starting with something really simple such as sardines, or if you've got some chicken left over, or a tin of tuna, or even just something appetizing towards a cat is where I'd start with. And making sure, if we're using things like your tins of tuna or sardines, you're sitting it as far back in the trap as you possibly can. And if you're using like scraps of chicken or red meat or that, hanging it up at the top corner of the trap, making it as far back that we possibly can to make sure that pedal does get hit. I'd definitely try to use those lures and those sort of more basic things before you move on to different things like cat scent and kitty litter and those sort of things that people talk about sometimes.
And what about setting up a camera trap to find out what's actually on your place?
Yeah, setting up a camera trap's really valuable. Making sure that you can identify what's going on even once you've set your trap, it's really good. But just knowing what's happening around the area and finding those locations that the cats are actually traversing is really important. So the trail camera becomes really valuable for monitoring how the cats are actually acting around your trap and around your lures, and it's a really good sign as to when you need to change your lures and whether it's working for that individual cat that you're trying to trap or not. So a lot of the time we see things, cats will walk up to a lure and they're just not interested in it, so that just might mean that we change from something like a can of sardines to a piece of fresh chicken, and that is the difference. Sometimes it's just, you come back the next day after making that small change and the same cat that wouldn't go into the trap for sardines is now going in for a piece of fresh chicken. Yeah, so a lot of landholders around here particularly see cats in their sheds. So machinery sheds and hay sheds are quite a nice warm place for a cat to live, so that's a common place for them to be. You definitely don't need such a complex setup in a machinery shed. With a steel trap, it blends in quite well with all the other steel objects. So I often say to people, put them behind your steel posts that are leaning up in your shed. Just put the trap in behind there, and generally that's all you need to do. You don't need to cover it with hessian and those sort of things because it's already in a covered environment. In the hay shed situation, it's just as simple as stacking a few hay bales together and making it like a little tunnel for them to walk down and into. And in those situations, I also like to suggest tying the trap up and doing some free feeding. If you know the cats are living in that particular area, Then you can also free feed them, get them really comfortable going into the back of the trap. So using a zip tie and tying it up before we set it can just make sure that we're guaranteed to catch that cat instead of it becoming trap shy.
So that's building trust in the cat. The cat trusts the trap, and then eventually it gets caught after a couple of weeks of, setting up.
It doesn't take a couple of weeks. It only would take a couple of days to do that. We do it with pigs quite often. Free feeding rabbits as well. It's quite a common thing to try to get them comfortable with what we're presenting to them before we do it. And cats being quite an intelligent creature, it is quite a good move if we know where they're living and they are going to be there quite regularly. It's really easy to tie the trap up for a day or so and give them 2 tins of cat food, for example, and then on the third time just set the trap and you're pretty well guaranteed to get it then.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Kyle. It's really interesting information. So for anyone interested in finding out more about managing feral cats on their property, please contact the local land services. And you can jump onto the BCT website to learn more about trail cameras and our education resources.